Whether you are visiting China for the food, the nature, or the bustling cities, you will have a lot of choices. China is more expensive than other Asia destinations, but it can be visited on a budget. This is Katie from Creative Travel Guide, and after living and travelling in China, we share how to travel China on a budget. Looking for more travel tips? Make sure you hit subscribe and ring that notification bell. So firstly, let's look at how you can get cheap accommodation in China. Staying in a Chinese hostel is a great way to save some money. The major cities like Beijing and Shanghai will have typical hostels that you are used to in Asia. But many Chinese hostels are more like 3-star hotels, with private rooms and bathrooms, as well as plenty of community rooms as well. You can find hostels in China on Hostel World or Ctrip. Which brings us on to our next tip for saving money on accommodation in China: to book with Agoda or Ctrip. Places like Booking.com and Expedia are perfectly good hotel websites for Europe or America. However, avoid them for China. Ctrip or Agoda offer hotels with prices up to 20% lower than other comparison websites. Plus, these two websites give you an option to pay on arrival. We definitely recommend doing this to avoid those card fees. Another way to get cheap accommodation in China is to book early. Hotels in cities like Shanghai or Beijing do book up, especially if you are visiting in the holidays. Also, China is not one of those Asian countries that you can rock up on arrival and get cheap hostel rooms, so book everything in advance. If you are looking for a bit of luxury but you are still travelling on a budget, make sure to avoid the Western named brand hotels. So Western chains like Hilton or Marriott can be found all over China. However, they are pretty expensive. Instead, you can opt for the 5-star Chinese hotels that don't have recognizable brands but are just as good and a lot cheaper. When you are booking that hotel, make sure to compare locations. Like most cities in the world, the closer to the city centre that you are, the more expensive your accommodation is going to be, and China is no different. The best thing about the major cities in China is the fantastic metro system. This means that you can stay further away from the city, use the Metro or Didi app to see the attractions, and get into the city while saving money. Also, planning when to book your trip is a great way to save money on all accounts. So travelling in the winter is a great time to save money on hotels and flights, because winter is off-peak season and it means that you're going to find a lot lower rates. However, wrap up warm, especially if you are visiting North China. But that being said, you are going to want to avoid February. It is a Chinese holiday, so generally speaking, avoid Chinese holidays at all costs. National holidays in China are a big thing. Residents leave the cities and return to their families for the holidays, but then rural locals will flock to the cities and travel destinations around the country too. Meaning trains, flights and hotels are booked to the max and prices are at their highest. Avoid travelling during Chinese New Year, often landing in February, and Golden Week, which runs during the start of October. If you can, it's actually a great idea to book your trip just after a national holiday. Everyone has to go back to work after that holiday, so you're going to be able to spend plenty of time in destinations and they'll be a lot quieter and a lot cheaper. So we've talked about cheap accommodation, now let's talk about getting around China on a budget. So first things first, you are going to want to use the speed trains. China has so many trains to choose from, and these are often a lot cheaper than flying and even bus travel. Browse and buy tickets on Ctrip and make sure to book in advance, again, especially if you're visiting during a holiday or during the summertime. For trains up to around 6 hours, you can choose between second or first class tickets, whilst longer trains will offer hard or soft seats or hard sleeper tickets. Plus, if you do take a night train, you can save money on a hotel room when taking that sleeper train. However, if you do have a limited time in China, then you can get some cheap flights. A few ways to save money on flights is by checking prices on Skyscanner, but then also comparing prices on Ctrip as well. Like I mentioned before, this is a Chinese travel app with prices that are catered towards the locals. If you plan on getting many flights around China, then definitely make use of those multi-flight options. We tend to use Skyscanner, but most comparison flight websites will offer an opportunity for you to use multi-flights. This means that you will book 5 or 6 flights at once and save some money, especially if you are choosing the same airline. And talking about airlines, Spring Airlines is a great option if you are trying to travel China on a budget. They are a low-cost budget airline, so book your trips up using them and make sure you check their website directly as well. So you've got to your chosen destination in China. Now let's talk about how to get around the cities of China on a budget. So something that you cannot miss when you are in China is the sheer amount of bikes everywhere. So bikes are a big thing in China because you can rent them and literally leave them wherever you want to. These bikes will have a barcode on the back. You can scan the bike using your WeChat app and pay a very small fee to ride around the city and then leave it wherever you want to when you are done with it. Alternatively, if biking isn't for you, then you can get the metro. Now, a lot of the cities in China will have some type of metro system, and they all come with a metro app, so download these before your trip so you can navigate your way around the city. Alternatively, you can also use Didi. So Didi is the Chinese version of Uber, and it is actually really easy to use. Make sure you turn on your location so it can find where you are, and a lot of destinations on the app are in English. Plus, you can communicate with your driver and it will translate the text for you so you don't have to worry about not knowing any Chinese. Moving on to my favourite part, how to eat cheaply in China. So firstly, of course, this is one of my favourite rules for saving money in a place, is to eat locally. Stick to the local food and restaurants in China. You can get delicious meals in a restaurant for as little as 40 RMB, whilst a Western meal will cost 100 RMB or more. Street food is also a great option, especially if you are in those tourist cities. You will find food vendors around the city selling snacks or whole meals for as little as 4 RMB or 50 cents. Unfortunately, these are becoming less and less common outside of the tourist areas, but when you find one, make sure you take advantage of it. But you can find some hole-in-the-wall restaurants. So street vendors are becoming less popular due to government regulations, but that isn't stopping locals selling their delicious and cheap food. You can find vendors selling from tiny booths around a city, especially near food or fresh markets. Or you can find vendors selling from a front window of their house. This food is catered to the locals, so you know it will be good and affordable. Something you do have to avoid though is eating at hotel or hostel restaurants. Now, after a long day out seeing all of the sights and attractions that a city has to offer, it can be really tempting just to stay in your hostel and eat the food there. However, because they know that you are a tourist, those prices are going to be higher. You are much better off finding a local restaurant, perhaps one that is further away from the city centre, and trying some local food at a cheaper price. And a few last tips for visiting China on a budget. Make sure you bargain. So when buying from vendors in both markets or small stores, negotiate a price with the seller. This is particularly true if you are in a market in the major cities. Also, make sure to avoid the scams. In some sightseeing areas of Shanghai or Beijing, you will find similar scams. Girls or students will invite you to a bar, restaurant, coffee shop or tea house only to order an expensive dish and leave you with the bill. If someone seems too nice and wants to spend lots of time with you, there's probably a reason for it. Also, whilst you're in China, you will need to use a VPN to access social media and Google. Whilst living in China, we personally always used ExpressVPN because it was consistently reliable, but you can get a free VPN before arriving in China too. One last thing, whilst you're in China, make sure you see the free and cheap sites. Similar to other places in Asia, China is home to some beautiful temples that are really cheap to visit, as well as free beautiful parks and interesting and affordable museums. So those are the best ways to save money in China and travel China on a budget. Let us know where you are heading to in the comments below. We can't wait to hear from you. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please make sure you give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe. Take care, guys, and until next time, stay creative.